or he, him, his, and I want to welcome you to the Engaged Employee Podcast. Our mission is to emphasize the relationship between the employee and the workplace with the goal of enhancing engagement levels to create a more productive and satisfying work environment. While many organizations strive to create a more engaging atmosphere, they often miss the mark by forcing connection with big team building events like axe throwing or escape rooms. Those activities only leave employees with a short-lived sense of belonging. Organizations may also try smaller and more suffocating events like happy hours or group birthday celebrations that their employees feel obligated to attend. As a social connections and business culture coach, I've found that to create a stable, engaged, and productive workforce, there needs to be a shift in focus from mandatory fun and manufactured connection towards building trust and authentic conversation. Join me and a guest as we dive into social wellness strategies for the individual employee, techniques for developing interpersonal relationships with coworkers, and even some approaches for leaders to enrich the overall organizational culture. The Engaged Employee Podcast starts now. Hi, welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast. My name is Coach Lee, and my guest today is Jayson Moran. Jayson is a coaching psychologist who focuses on the psychology of performance, development, and well-being. Jayson's focus is on helping professionals and entrepreneurs develop, move forward, and overcome challenging business and personal situations. He helps leaders increase effectiveness by focusing on three key themes related to their performance development. Jayson also provides one-on-one coaching, talks, and workshops, leadership and professional development programs to entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, and government departments. Our conversation today will be focused on individual self-care strategies for the employees. Jayson, welcome to the Engaged Employee Podcast.
Hi, Lee. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am fantastic. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm glad to have this conversation. When we first met, we talked about the psychologist, coaching, psychology, and I got a bit confused about what that is. And then you explained to me. So I wonder if you could share what that means and how that shows up, because I don't think I'm the only person who may be confused by that.
Okay, so sometimes I suppose when people hear the term psychologist, they are associating that with a particular branch of psychology. And that would be the branches of psychology like psychotherapy, clinical psychology. And what a lot of those professionals do, I suppose, is help people deal with things like negative emotion or very bad negative behavior. So I suppose a lot of what they're doing is maybe looking back into the past, helping people deal with some form of trauma so that they can, I suppose, function in the present. I suppose the difference with me is I'm very much more future focused. So I'm looking at how your patterns of thinking, behavior, emotion, how they are impacting, I suppose, your results now and how we can get you where it is that you need to go. So it's not so much focused on, I suppose, removing negative emotion, but much more about creating positive emotion by getting you where it is you need to go.
Absolutely. And then the coaching piece of it, it certainly sounds like that's part of it too, where we're actually, as coaches, I understand that piece, helping people create the life that they want. And so using a bit of psychology and helping them do that too, it sounds like.
Absolutely. I mean, everything I do will be evidence-based. So I'd be heavily influenced by the field of positive psychology. Really that's the psychology of happiness, so to speak. So yeah.
Wonderful. So I'd be curious to know how this applies since we're working with individuals today and we're talking about how to create those meaningful connections or create that engagement in the workplace. There's something that I said in the introduction about three key themes that are related to performance and development. Could you share a bit about, I know this is a question that could be wide open, but how your coaching, psychology, and the three key themes help with performance and development?
I suppose really what I'm all about, as I said, is helping people move forward. Sometimes that's about dealing with a challenging situation, but in order to help people move forward, I focus on these kind of three key themes or three key areas. So the first is happiness and well-being. So we're looking at questions like what makes you happy. How can we get you a little bit closer to that? And the reason I focus on that is, we are just much more effective when we are, I suppose, in a good emotional place. So, we might look at things like stress and stress reduction, for example, but also looking at, how do we, do things in our day-to-day that are going to make us happier and make us feel more motivated and confident. Second area I tend to help people with is gaining clarity, because in order to move forward, well, you have to know where it is that you're going. So we might look at questions like, are your goals in line with what's important? Are your goals in line with what's going to make you happy? Have you a plan in place to get there? The third area then, so the third key theme is overcoming those barriers to performance and productivity. So common barriers I help deal with would be things like, I suppose, maybe behavior change. Interpersonal relations would be a good one. Emotional management, so dealing with things like anger or fear. So that's kind of the three main areas. So it's health and well-being, or stress and well-being, gaining clarity in terms of where we're going forward, and overcoming those barriers that tend to get in the way.
Yeah, I was taking notes, and I think those are all fantastic places. It definitely sounds like the positive psychology is coming out here, especially with the first one being the first one is happiness and clarity. I believe in clarity so much. I think it's very important to be clear about what it is that you're looking for. I often say that when I was trying to figure out my life and who I wanted to connect to, and how I wanted to make connections with people, I couldn't tell them what it is that I wanted from them. They would always bring me their brand of friendship or connection, community, and I would say, no, I don't want this. But I couldn't tell them what it was. And it caused a lot of friction and stress in my relationships, which goes into this emotional management that you talked about.
Huge,
So
yeah.
I'd be curious to know, because I know I have tons of stories related to how I just didn't have any of those three things. Do you have a story, or do you have an experience that you can share about someone that you've helped, an actionable step that you've done to help them move through these particular pillars to understand more about themselves and create that life that they're looking for?
Absolutely. Like a former client of mine, one of the favorite people I've ever worked with. She was an absolutely awesome human, and really, she was trying to get her PhD finished, and the deadline was coming very, very close, and she was procrastinating really, really badly. And because it was a very tough situation, I suppose she was being very, very hard on herself. So the first thing we did when we got in is we had a look at, I suppose, her stress and her stress levels from a couple of different angles. So the first thing we looked at was her self-care strategies. What was she doing on a daily basis to help kind of reduce the physical impact of stress? So this is things like, are you exercising on a daily basis? I mean, you need about 30 minutes of some form of cardio. You want to get your heart rate up there a little bit on a daily basis if you're finding yourself chronically stressed. We also looked at some form of deep relaxation technique for her. And the reason for that is what you're trying to do is bring down your physiological system so that you can function again. And the reason we focus on those self-care strategies at the beginning of a process and helping someone who's really chronically stressed is, I suppose, by relaxing the body and bringing down your stress levels, what it allows you to do is actually clear your mind a little bit so you can start to focus on, one, your mindset, and two, solving the problems, taking care of the things that are actually leading to your stress in the first place. The second area then I would have worked on with this lady would have been in terms of her self-narrative, or the stories, I suppose, that she's telling herself around herself and her situation that was leading to a lot of the stress. And, we would work on those, identify them, challenge them, and help her, I suppose, come up with more helpful narratives that are actually going to help in terms of her motivation and in terms of her confidence. third area then we looked at was actually just starting to get stuck into some of the practical application of the problems, because I suppose you can do a lot of work at stress in terms of the physiology and making yourself relaxed, and you can do a lot on your mindset. But if you're not dealing with your problems and I suppose starting to reduce them a little bit, well then, all the mindset work and all the physiological work in the world aren't going to actually lead to a long-term reduction in stress. So that was kind of the three ways we did it. Delighted to say, and it was a very intense project because she had a deadline for the PhD. So we went right into it over like 6-7 weeks. But delighted to say she got it in time and is now qualified and teaching. So yeah.
Wow, that's a really great story. I'm always here for success stories. I really love the success stories about how people are actually getting to that place where they really want to be, providing that clarity. And of course, we may not think about how the self-care strategies are impacting us on the daily basis. Like we don't have any. Like I don't know what I do, I just do what I'm supposed to. I'm not really focused on just doing whatever is in front of me and not considering that I'm a person or a priority. So I really like this idea of the self-care strategies that you talked about, the deep relaxation and really refocusing and allowing yourself to deal with that stress properly. So I bet anybody who is listening would be interested to learn more about how you help them. So I wonder, what's a typical session like working with you, and how can people get a hold of you?
Okay, well, I couldn't say there's a typical session, but usually, like, I suppose it depends. I suppose everything's very bespoke. But usually I work in 90-minute blocks. Anything shorter, it doesn't give you the depth to get into what I do. Anything longer, and we just start to get a bit tired. And in terms of, I suppose, usually really they're conversations to help you unravel what's important and what's going on around a particular issue for you. And I suppose taking time to talk about these things, what it does is it starts to increase awareness and you start to get insight, and insight itself then starts to lead to change. So when we change the meaning that we attach to a situation, it tends to change our emotional response and in time our behavioral response, and that in turn tends to lead to changing results. In terms of getting in touch with me, probably the best place is my website, so JaysonMoran.com. And I'm also quite active on LinkedIn as well. If you want to reach out there, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, that's where I found you, on LinkedIn. But I like the idea of having things change, though. The idea that if you change the way you see things, the way you see things changes, and just bringing that to awareness. So there's a quote from someone somewhere. I know it's a quote from somebody. So if you know what it is, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know, and I'll give them credit. But I can't remember what it is, who gave me credit, who is responsible for that, and how it got into my consciousness. But Jayson, I really, really enjoyed listening and understanding more about what it is to be a positive psychology coach. Essentially, that's how I have to think about it, because of that psychology word. And I hope that everybody else out there has learned something new that can help them with their individual relationships or individual connection with themselves. Thank you so much, Jayson. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Lee. Been an absolute pleasure. Cheers.
And there you have it, another insightful episode of the Engaged Employee Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the deep dive into the world of employee engagement, leadership, and workplace dynamics. The Engaged Employee Podcast is brought to you by the Patterns of Possibility, where we help people make more meaningful relationships in both their personal and professional life. Before we wrap up, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our incredible guests and, of course, our loyal listeners. Your support keeps us motivated to bring you valuable content each week. If you found today's discussion thought-provoking and want to learn more about how we can help you or your organization make more meaningful relationships, go to patternsofpossibility.com and book a friendly conversation with me. or you can email me your questions at patternsofpossibility@gmail.com. Stay connected with us and engage with fellow listeners by following the Patterns of Possibility on LinkedIn. You can also catch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to stay in the loop. And if you prefer the audio version, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means the world to us, and by subscribing, you'll never miss an episode. Thank you for being a part of our journey to create workplaces where passion meets productivity. Until next time, I'm Coach Lee. Stay engaged, stay inspired.